Now let's talk about social identity theory. I always use this example to get started because I do think we can all relate to it if we have a cell phone. So you have Apple people and you have Android people, and it's really interesting to have a conversation about this in a classroom, particularly because everybody falls into one or the other most of the time. So, social identity theory is where individuals use mediated messages to foster positive social identity and boost their self-esteem. So, in groups, and in this case, you can see that the person who made this image of the Android and the Apple logo, they're clearly an Android person, right? So in this case, this person made this image to boost that identity with phone ownership, which seems really silly, right? So our in group is one's own group. So in this case, and this is like a very like not important identity factor, of course, but the in group in this case would be the Android, right? Because that's the perspective of the person who made it. And the out group would be those outside of one's own in group. So the out group would be the Apple users. Okay, something else about this. I'm using this silly example of phones, but when we think about social identity versus personal identity, our personal identity is the way we might describe ourselves or the way that we see ourselves, where our social identity is more about how society views us, right? What categories society has decided to place us into, and what that means about well, a lot of different things. We can talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so some key terms of social identity theory. In-group favoritism is the first, the tendency to favor one's own group over the other. So you might have, if you've had me in class before, you might know that I went to WVU for my PhD. And I didn't go for the football, but I ended up going to some games, and I just didn't understand the in-group favoritism. And I'm also not really like a sports person. I'm not a sports person, but I'm not like a super duper sports fan. Um, so I didn't know the deal when I went to this game, but people really like their sports teams and they really like the fans that are like them who are rooting for the same team. That's an example of in-group favoritism. Then social mobility, this is movement between groups. So, like I said earlier, your social identity has a lot to do with how society perceives you. So, this is a difficult one because a lot of our social identities or social identities that we that overlap, right? Because we have so many identities that overlap. It's it's difficult to mobilize between some of those because they have to do with like biological factors. There are some, however, like if you're a sports team person and you can mobilize between being a WBU fan and I don't know, whoever else, I don't know sports, sorry, fan, then that's a way to switch between your different social identities on the same spectrum. If that we'll go over more examples in just a second. And then social creativity. This is where group members focus on unique dimensions for comparison. So this is all about how we can it's a little bit different than positive distinctiveness or in-group favoritism because it's like reframing something, right? Or maybe what's the word? Reclaiming something, getting creative with how we express our social identity, especially in times of um uh group it's like group lack of cohesion. It's the opposite of cohesion. It's like when somebody in your group, your social group or your community does something that like is not really great for the whole group. So let's talk about different examples of this. I'm gonna just pause here and get into those in a second so you don't get viewing fatigue.